So I was tasked during an assignment at school for a course called Garveyism in the Americas and Africa, with an essay on Rastafari and Garvey. And the aim of my essay was to point out the contradictions between the two figures, right? Because within Rastafari, we see Marcus Garvey as the prophet and Haile Selassie as the redeemer, or some would say God, even though within Rastafari there are disputes as to that claim. But I knew beforehand that within Rastafari there was contention between the two figures because Garvey had no love for Haile Selassie. He was not, well, he didn't hide his disdain for Haile Selassie. In one of his editorials in March 1937, he literally states that Haile Selassie is just an ordinary man, right? And that he is nothing but just a slave master. Right? This is Marcus Garvey telling you that the person who is the supposed redeemer is nothing but a slave master, right? And these accounts are confirmed because that's what emperors have, because he was an emperor, and emperors have slaves. Also, the conflation of Ethiopia with Abyssinia, right? Because what we know today as Ethiopia is a modern creation, right? It was formed through coercion and brutality on ethnic groups in what we know today as Ethiopia via, or some of those groups would be the Oromo, the people from the Somali region, or Ogaden, or other areas that we know called Ethiopia, right? They were subjugated by the Abyssinians, like Menelik and Johannes, who were mass slave traders, right? And were clients of Europe as well. In my essay, I talk about the varying accounts of them writing to the Europeans as their friends, right? I have here with me a letter that he wrote to the Queen of England in regards to them assisting him. He says, "To our friend Her Majesty Queen Victoria, Queen of Great Britain and Ireland, Defender of the Faith, Empress of India, greetings. We ask most especially for news of your precious health. I wrote a letter to Your Majesty dated 25 Mekalem, I'm assuming that is the Ethiopian calendar, 1883, but I do not know if it reached you. The great English power being up to this day the friend of the Ethiopian Empire, and in recognition of your goodwill to her, we express to you our gratitude." Right? So this is Menelik writing to the Queen of England, right? And we are led to believe that Ethiopia was supposedly this front for African liberation against Europe. It is far from that. I have here, again, in regards to the slavery the slavery within Ethiopia, or what we know today as Ethiopia, right? That some might position Haile Selassie as an abolitionist, right? When it would be unfair to do so. When Haile Selassie himself noted that in his autobiography, that slavery within Ethiopia was still ongoing even when he was in power. And in the essay, as I'm about to read for you, I'm going to show you that this is so. All right? So much so that even the Ethiopian rulers, including those who did not approve the institution, such as Emperor Haile Selassie, are said to have slaves by the thousands. Usually the counter to this argument is then the position of Haile Selassie as an abolitionist, as I stated earlier. Even Selassie wrote in his autobiography that slavery was, and this is quoting him, firmly established by custom of his predecessors, and any decrees made were unenforced. This stance was supported by edicts signed by Selassie in 1924 and again in 1931 and 32. The decree of 1924 was a significant step in appeasing the tripartite powers in Ethiopia's desire to join the League of Nations. The tripartite powers, right? Many people don't know who those people are. The tripartite powers include France, England, Spain, Belgium, the countries that were involved in the partition or the scramble of Africa, right? And I have here again an Ethiopian historian telling you from the Oromo region that Ethiopia, or the Abyssinian feudal monarchs, took part in the partition of Africa. Primarily the Horn of Africa, because people tend to neglect the Horn of Africa as not a part of Africa, or it's just Egypt or some Kemetic lineage thing that didn't change throughout the thousands of years that it was there. The speed with which this great extension of the empire was made is explained by the firearms which the Emperor Menelik was obtaining from France. This same superiority was carrying the European powers at the same speed at the same time from the coast into the heart of Africa. The Swedish historian Norberg also says that using the same military technology as the European powers, Menelik managed not only to conquer the neighboring African territories, but was also able to garrison them with large forces called Naftania, who controlled and lived and conquered the populations. As suggested by Richard Koch, the system of near serfdom imposed on wide areas of the South by the end of the 19th century could have not been maintained had the newcomers not been so differently armed. The historian Darkwa notes that Menelik succeeded in keeping the arms out of the reach of the Oromo enemy. This is the ethnic group that the Abyssinians conquered. He did this by imposing a strict control over the movement of firearms into his tributary territories and the lands beyond the frontiers. Darkwa also notes that in 1877, a Frenchman named Portier was employed in training a group of Shiwan youths in European military techniques. Another Frenchman, Pino, was a regular officer in the army which was commanded by Ras Gobana. Swiss engineers like Zimmermann were employed, among other things, to build bridges across the Awash and other rivers to facilitate movement. According to Chris Pruty, colonial Artamanov, together with the Europeans, was attached to the forces commanded by Ras Tassamana Nadiu in Ilu Ababor. He adds that even Count Nicholas Leonatev, a colonial or a colonel in the Russian army, was a commander of a force which was used to conquer the southwest regions in the 1890s. Right? This is Emperor Menelik we're talking about here, the predecessor to Haile Selassie. And here are countless examples of him using European weaponry, European technology, and European man or army resources to conquer African territories in and around his region. Right? So, station the Battle of Adwa or any other battle that Menelik went to as secondary to things like the Haitian Revolution, right? Because I was honestly told that Ethiopia was the only non-colony within Africa, right? And many people are told that, and we believe it. But once you research, you realize that Ethiopia was a creation by colonial powers, right? To maintain their interest in the Horn of Africa, right? Again, the book, The Invention of Ethiopia, is crucial, very, very crucial in understanding this, right? And if you speak to anybody in Eritrea or Somali region, or even some minority groups within Ethiopia, they will tell you that nobody there likes Selassie. Like, they don't like him at all, right? Even after they fought on the side of Menelik and Selassie, they themselves amputated many of the soldiers that were from those ethnic groups while kissing up to the Libyans and the Italians, right? Even army veterans have come out to say that, yo, this is why X, Y, and Z, hence why there's a state called Eritrea today, because of situations such as that, carried out by Haile Selassie himself, and Menelik as well. because as I said earlier, they were mass slavers, right? And it's very concerning for me, given that when I speak to Rastafari or I speak to elders in the Rastafarian community, they speak with such contempt of everything else, but tend to disregard this as some, you know, something small, right? They hold so much contempt for Christianity and Islam and Judaism and all the other religions that are out there, but still don't want to acknowledge that the person that they say is the Redeemer is or was called a slave master by the Prophet in his later years. And in another speech that Garvey has, he doesn't call it Ethiopia. He says the Abyssinian Negroes, which refers to a specific ethnic group, which is the Abyssinians, who have taken on the identity of what we know today, or what Rastafarians say as the true Israelites, because they have the Ark of the Covenant and etc., which is a part of the mythology, right? And this mythology was used to justify the subjugation of the ethnic groups within Ethiopia, right? Because they are the chosen race to rule over the Oromo or the Nilotic or the other variations of people lying in that region. Another thing that people should also note is that the name Ethiopia was changed Abyssinia was changed to Ethiopia during the time of Selassie, right? The name, meaning it was always referenced before Selassie, in or to the people of that region, or outwardly as Abyssinia, right? In the constitution, it wasn't until Selassie came that the name changed. And again, the reason for this name change is that he was losing his legitimacy as the oppressed people within Ethiopia were rising up. Hence, you know, the revolution, the overthrow of him, and the implementation of the Derg regime. Within this name change, he appealed to a man by the name of Mr. Dulles, right? If you guys want to know who Mr. Dulles is, just Google the Dulles brothers. One was the first Secretary of State under President Eisenhower, and the other was the CIA director, right? So these were his friends, right? There's another instance that is a flaw within Selassie's camp, is that the exile, or when he was exiled from Ethiopia, or Abyssinia, because I don't like conflicting the two, when he was exiled from Abyssinia, he went to England, and his grandson says that he felt at home in England, right? Can you tell me which Pan-Africanist, which liberation leader of any sort can feel comfortable in the empire, at the core of the empire at the time, right? And all of Haile Selassie's travels were primarily to the United States and to Europe. He stopped in Jamaica once in all these years, but visited America and England many, many, many times. Why? Because he was a loyal client of the United States and Britain, right? If you look at his alliance to things like USAID, which is a neo-colonial agency used to flush out or to burden the domestic produce economy, like farmers and stuff like that, right? With foreign products and goods. And all sorts of rubbish, that the same thing they use in Haiti, because that's what USAID is in Haiti for the destabilization, or the continuation of the destabilization of Haiti. Those were his allies and his friends. It is referenced, or it is said that in one of his speeches, or it's recorded that he himself says, "Oh, I am an African. I am Caucasian." Right? I don't know where the primary source comes from, but I remember reading that in an article in regards to Selassie. Right? Now compare that to the legacy of Marcus Garvey, right? Marcus Garvey came from a working class background, right? He was not a royal all his life, and to be a royal, that requires that the majority of the population is destitute, right? So again, this obsession that I see Rastafari have with royalty. It's strange because in order to have royalty, as I said earlier, you have to have mass subjugation of the population, as all the resources are siphoned off to royalty. Based on what? Some mythical thing, right? Like, that shouldn't be justified in any way or shape or form. Why don't we value societies such as the Balanta that Amilcar Cabral studied, which had no classes, where everyone was basically equal on all footing? Why are we so focused on people like Mansa Musa and Selassie and all those kinds of leaders who, if we were living within those historical contexts, we would probably hate them, right? So it's time we move away from studying empires, right? Because those empires fell for a reason, and all empires come to an end, and empires require an imperialist expansion. So if you are against European imperialism, right, or American imperialism, then you must be against domestic imperialism, right? So it's not that you want to recreate those empires, you are trying to build something new for all African people around the world, right? Because your opposition to imperialism shouldn't just be because a white man is imperialist. It should be to the neo-colonial puppets who are also, or have neo-colonial, or have imperialist ideas. For example, Paul Kagame was here the other day. I implore you guys, that guy is not a friend of African people, right? He's not. Please do your research on Paul Kagame, right? Do your research on the mercenaries that he's funding in Congo. Do your research on the many people who he has sent to prison because they speak out against him. Do your research on how he was trained in the United States at Fort Kent. Do your research on how he is backed by some of the largest capitalists in the world. Those are his friends, right? So again, I'm sorry I don't have more time to go in depth with this, because I don't want to provide people with just sound bites. I want to actually show you the stuff. But I implore you to do your research on him, as well as everything I've said, right? And the essay should be published on ResearchGate by the time this video is available to you. So yeah, big up, one love, and you know, Pan-African liberation is key, but don't forget the class context in which it needs to take place.
Well, let me hear you say,